Hi there. I'm Scott, and this is GreatScott Knitting, a podcast, and welcome to episode 5. If you're new to this podcast and this channel, thank you for being willing to check out what's going on here. And if you're a returning viewer, I thank you for your support and that you continue to watch. Today in Wichita, Kansas, it's 89 degrees and 60% humidity, making it very sticky out as we had some rain this morning. It's a good day to stay inside with the air conditioning and have a nice cold iced tea and talk about some knitting. So here we go. Last couple of weeks, I have been really focused on working on a shawl pattern that I'm designing and wanting to get a couple of prototypes out just to see what I really wanted to do. I had this idea around this pattern and just needed to try out a couple of things. So right now my finished objects are around that pattern. So let me just kind of show you what I started with as my first prototype for my shawl design. My first prototype was this. The basis of the pattern is, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's the Quaker ridging knit pattern from Barbara Walker's A Treasury of Knitting Patterns. And at the bottom of that pattern, which is basically some garter stitch, or excuse me, stockinette, followed by a garter stitch ridge, or a reverse stockinette ridge, some more stockinette, and then some reverse stockinette in a few rows. So at the bottom of that, I added an eyelet band. But I put that directly at the bottom of this garter stitch, or this reverse garter stitch section. Basically what I'm doing here is then going from just doing some color work and some color work striping, going from a solid, some striping, the contrasting color, more striping, back to my main color, and so on, until I got to the end where I had a couple of rows of some eyelets and then a picot edge bind off. And so here's what that looks like, all finished up. I do like how this turned out. A couple other things before I get too deep into my impressions of it. It is a worsted weight shawl, so it knits up very quickly into a generally good size. My prototype is simply some acrylic yarn that I have. I'm using Loops and Threads Impeccable Solids in white, and the blue color is called Clear Blue. So that's what I did for this particular prototype. I do like it. However, a couple of things that were bugging me about it were I lost, because of where I put this eyelet band, I lost some of the nature of the reverse stockinette at the bottom of the Quaker ridging pattern. So that continued to kind of bug me as I kind of sat with this for a couple of days. And so I cast on, or I did a little bit of noodling with the pattern, and I use Excel when I do my noodling. I basically build out a chart and decide how what patterns I want to use and how I want that to turn out. So I did my noodling, and changed up the pattern just a little bit. Still doing the Quaker Ridge section, which is, again, that stockinette, a row of reverse stockinette, and then a reverse stockinette band. The change up that I did here is I have the eyelet band, but I have it a row lower than it was before, and then I follow it up with another reverse stockinette band. So it kind of works out just a little bit better. Then I did that same color work of going from the main color to some striping, then that eyelet band, then the contrasting color, striping in the opposite direction, the eyelet band, and so on. Ending again, but this time ending a little bit differently with the eyelet band striping, and again with the picot edge bind off that I really liked with this. And so here's how the second prototype turned out. Again, I used a worsted weight yarn. For this prototype, I used a Lion brand Pound of Love in their Oxford Gray, and I believe, because I lost the ball band, I'm not sure what it is, but this pale yellow, I believe, is it's either Impeccable Solids, again, from Loops and Threads, or gosh, I can't think of it, Mainstay from Walmart. So it's either one of those two. I'm not sure which. But again, I like how it knit up. I'm really interested. I'm excited to eventually move this into a wool-based yarn to see how it opens up maybe a little bit better. I did aggressively block these two shawls, and even used a little bit of steam on them to kind of help them hold their openness. But I like how these turned out. I am right now with my pattern in a testing stage, so I have a couple of people who have volunteered to test knit my pattern to help me work out kinks and errors and all that kind of good stuff that I often have when I am designing a little bit of a shawl pattern. So those are my two finished objects in terms of what I've been working on. And of course, as you can see, I like to dabble a little bit into shawl design, especially shawls. Although I have done a couple of cowls as well, but I haven't really published any of those patterns. They've just been for me to kind of play around with. So those are my works in progress, or my finished objects. My works in progress then remain the Heartland Lace shawl. Yeah, here it is. So the Heartland Lace shawl, which you really can't see the lace in it because, of course, it needs to be blocked to really open it up. But this is the Heartland Lace shawl by Evelyn Clark, and the yarn I'm using is the Knit Crate Vidalana Lofty DK, which is a 48% merino, 20% alpaca, 32% organic cotton, in the colorway of Firewood. So that is still on my needles. I hope to get back to it over the next couple of weeks and maybe even get it off the needles. Well, we'll see. And then I did cast on another shawl. I'm slowly trying to get through. I have a large collection of worsted weight yarns. Some of it is acrylic and some of it is some acrylic blends. So I have cast on a version of the Dotted Rays by Stephen West. One of the things I like to do, and I have always been, I've always done this. I like to take patterns, especially lace patterns, but I like to take patterns that were designed for either fingering, sport, or DK weight yarn, and do them in worsted, just to see how they turn out, and basically to say that I can. I kind of imagine in myself, or in my mind, that I'm kind of sticking it to the designer. I don't know. But I like how this is turning out. The yarn that I'm using is Karen Cakes, and which is a 80% acrylic, 20% wool blend yarn from Karen, and the colorway that I'm using is Blueberry Muffin. A few years back, I came across the Karen Cakes and really kind of fell in love with them. They were have been my stepping stone away from the 100% acrylic yarn, which I do have enjoyed knitting with 100% acrylic yarn for a long time. But as I have done some reading around the fact that acrylics and other man-made fibers, as you launder them and use them, they slough off microfibers that get into the water and can be over a long term and in larger, and as wildlife ingest this, it is detrimental to the health of wildlife. And so I am slowly moving away from using a lot of acrylic yarns to using more natural fibers, like wool-based or protein-based fibers, and cellulose-based fibers like cotton and linen. So anyway, Dotted Rays. I've done several of these Dotted Rays shawls, not necessarily in worsted weight, but I really love how they knit up. They're always interesting. The different types of yarn, especially if you use a self-striping yarn, it does some really interesting things as you knit it in terms of creating these swooping patterns in the shawl. So that's one of the things I cast on this past couple of weeks and have been working on. Acquisitions. So I haven't actually purchased any yarn over the past couple of weeks, and my Knit Crate subscription has yet to come in. So if it weren't for my neighbor thinking of me as she was going through a local store recently, I wouldn't have any acquisitions. But she picked up a few sale items that she found as she was wandering through the aisles of a local store. And so I do have a few things that are acquisitions. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this skein of Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick Stripes. This is an 80% acrylic, 20% wool blend yarn. It is a super bulky yarn. that it's about 140 grams, which is about 87 yards of material. And the colorway is Coney Island, which is this nice, it has a nice natural color twisted with a gray, and it looks like a tannish orange, a reddish orange, and looks like maybe even a darker brown in a striping fashion. So that looks really nice. I think this will be a nice hat that I might even gift back to my neighbor for the winter time. The second skein I want to talk about that she picked up for me is the Karen Simply Soft yarn. This is Karen Simply Soft Tweeds, which I had never seen. This is really quite interesting. This is a 97% acrylic, 3% viscose yarn in worsted weight. It is 141 grams, approximately 240 yards. The colorway is off-white, but of course it has those tweedy that tweedy nature where it has these little pops of color that are bunched up in the twist of the yarn, and those pops of color are browns and tans. So again, a really kind of a pretty, it is a very pretty colorway. I only have the one skein, so I'll have to find a one skein wonder type of pattern to work with that one. And then the final skein of yarn is Red Heart with Love Metallic, which is a 99% acrylic, 1% other. That 1% other in the twist of this yarn is a metallic red fiber. I'm sure it's not metal, but it's this metallic red fiber which has this lovely sparkle to it. So it's a red on red sparkle. This again is a worsted weight yarn, 127 grams, which is about 200 yards of sparkly red yarn. So it'll be kind of fun to do up some, maybe a hat or something out of that for the holidays to share with someone who needs a warm, sparkly hat. So that'll be fun to work with. So future cast-ons. Over the next couple weeks, I am not committed to anything other than I believe I am going to cast on a version or a project with this pattern that I am working on finalizing. And over the next couple of weeks, I hope that my test knitters are able to give me some feedback to be able to improve and finish my pattern so that I can get it published. I do publish my patterns on Ravelry, so feel free. I'll let everybody know when that gets published as well so that you can go check it out if you're interested. One of the things I want to do as either as I publish it or right before I publish it is to cast on a wool version of this particular pattern. And really quite frankly, these two skeins of yarn are the impetus for my even designing that particular pattern. I got these two skeins of yarn in my knit crate in January. They are absolutely gorgeous. They are beautiful skeins of yarn that Knit Crate created with Brooklyn Boy Knits, and I love the yarn. I just was not crazy about the pattern that Knit Crate had put in that month for use with these yarns. So I've been looking for something to use these particular skeins of yarn together, because I do want to keep them. I wanted to keep them together. I didn't want to do two separate projects, maybe a hat and a cowl or something. So I couldn't find anything online that I really thought would show off how pretty these yarns are. So that's why I developed this Quaker Ridge eyelet shawl. I want to cast on with these two colors, and because I believe that I really do feel that these two, they are tonally similar. This colorway, which is the Royal Court colorway, has some pops of purple and violet, which don't really play well on the camera, but are just really lovely, and they contrast with some blues and teals and grays throughout this colorway. The other colorway is called Empire, which is this tonal blue, has some deep sort of navy-ish color in through royal blues and light blues into some sky blues. So I believe I really, these were designed to go together. So I think these will be a nice complementary set in this particular shawl. I think they are different enough to give some of that striping effect. The other nice aspect about this particular shawl design is it has a lot of texture in it. So I think that will help accentuate these yarns, and again, the shawl, I think the shawl will still show off this lovely texture as well as the colorways that I'm using. That's my plan, is to cast on my new shawl pattern with these skeins of yarn. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, as I finalize that pattern. Okay. The other, I do have a couple other patterns that I am considering casting on, and I'm thinking of using these skeins of yarn. These are, again, Knit Crate skeins of yarn. Again, these were designed in these skeins, these colorways were designed in conjunction with Brooklyn Boy Knits. This particular colorway is called Concrete Jungle. It is a complementary color to the other set that I had. These were some of the different colorways that they had for the month of January this year. The name of the yarn, both that set and these two, is their Knitology worsted weight yarn, which is a 100% superwash merino yarn. I really do. I love, when I first saw this colorway, I really did love it, but I loved the blues a little bit better. But now that I have these in hand, I'm glad I went ahead and purchased these as well. So anyway, I want to do these up in a shawl, And again, there's just not a lot of great worsted weight shawls out there. But I did find a couple that I'm considering using these for. And I haven't decided which ones. One is the Not a Lot of Rain by Cozy Up Knits. Actually, the full title of that is Not a Lot of Rain in April by Cozy Up Knits, which is a worsted weight shawl, triangular shawl that they designed, or when they designed it, their knitting prototype for that is a variegated yarn. So I think this would be in keeping with that look and feel and nature that they had intended. The other potential shawl I'm considering is Galaxy Lemonade Shawl by Shannon Dunbobbin. Again, I believe this is a triangular shawl. Yes, it is a triangular shawl, but knit on the bias, so it's asymmetric. And again, the prototype that they show is a variegated yarn. So I guess the question for me to answer is, do I want to do a standard top-down triangle shawl or a more asymmetric type of shawl? Or potentially, do I want to design another shawl altogether? I have another idea, which is basically taking this triangle shawl that I just designed and using that same pattern and concept, but doing it as an asymmetrical shawl, but symmetrically. So basically a bias shawl. So I don't know. That might be what happens with those two skeins of yarn. Just as an idea. So I really don't know what I'm going to cast on, but it's probably going to be around those things. All right. Right now, that's all I have in terms of what I'm doing with knitting, which is really quite a lot, ultimately. So what else am I up to? My television watching and my streaming media watching. I'm still watching Star Wars Rebels from the beginning. I'm into season 3, which is when I really think it gets interesting for those of you who, well, I'm not going to give anything away. For those of you who may never have watched Star Wars Rebels, I do recommend it. It is on Disney Plus. It's set in the period between the Clone Wars and really right at the beginning of the rebellion. So the Empire is in power. Darth Vader is going around and mopping up any remnants of Jedi that he finds, and the rebellion is really just getting started and coming together, as there are little cells, individual cells of rebels around the galaxy who start to band together to fight the Empire collectively. And it's, of course, the Rebels centers around a hidden Jedi, his young Padawan who he finds, and a band of early rebels, an early rebel cell that then begins to work more collectively with the larger rebellion. And so it's really quite an interesting show. Again, I'm on season 3, which is where it really starts to get interesting. So I'm still watching that. I am nearing the end of season 2 of Pose, which is a series on Netflix. I do highly recommend watching this show, especially if you are someone like me in their early 50s, late 40s, maybe even into your mid 50s. People who lived through the 80s and early 90s. Pose is about the LGBTQ subculture in New York around the the ballroom scene, and I'm not talking about ballroom dancing. I'm talking about the LGBTQ ballroom, where marginalized people of color primarily would band together to form their own their own society, their own community. And it was around how do we support each other, and in the ballrooms the idea was to walk in various categories to show how well you could either pass in normal society, especially if you were transgender or a closeted homosexual, being able to pass in normal society, to be able to look the part, even though in normal society, most transgender people, gay people of color, were ostracized, especially in the 80s and 90s, and really still even up into today. It is set in the early 90s. Very interesting show that will take you back, especially if you're of a certain age, because of the music, the dress, the dancing, all of that is very nostalgic, nostalgia-ridden. It does focus on that middle period of the AIDS epidemic and the nature of the beginnings of ACT UP, the beginnings of better drugs, as well as when Madonna and Madonna's Vogue came out, thus highlighting that subculture within New York, especially around that ballroom scene. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm about 3 or 4 episodes from the end of season 2. It's really interesting. If you've not seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. Watch it, this weekend, because it's really good. A couple other things I watched on Netflix over the past couple weeks. I do like sort of the sci-fi fantasy types of shows. I watched the Netflix movie The Old Guard, which is about this group of immortals who have come together. They don't know why they're immortal, but they are, and they go around and basically help people in various ways. One of the main characters is an extremely old person. Extremely old person, looks extremely young, but there is an aspect of their immortality which eventually gives out, and they do become mortal and die. And so this extremely old person is dying, and or is susceptible to dying, and a new immortal has come to light. And so it is around sort of that interplay of the new and the old, as well as a whole a mission that they have to go on to basically protect themselves from a pharmaceutical company who wants to use their DNA to develop a drug and make a lot of money. It was actually a really good movie. I would actually be very interested in seeing other movies being made on this concept. Then I also watched this new Netflix series called Warrior Nun. Premise of this movie is that back in the Middle Ages, at the beginning of the Crusades, a female warrior was battling in the Crusades, had been injured, and a supposed angel shows up, removes his halo, and embeds this halo in her body, thus allowing her to heal, but also giving her superhuman powers, enhanced strength, the ability for her body to heal automatically, and throughout the ages, she forms this this convent of women who help her go around and rid the world of actual demons, because one of the things they find is that demons actually come into and inhabit the world, and it is their job to rid the world of these demons when they crop up. Well, what happens is, of course, through the years, different women become the bearer of the halo, and this particular series opens up with a non-believer having the halo placed in her dead body to protect it from a group of people who are trying to claim it, and the halo brings her back to life and heals her body of what was a problem for her. And the series is around how she is grappling with her new superhuman powers, as well as whether she wants to become part of this warrior nun sect within the Catholic Church or just go out on her own. So there's a lot of sort of angsty drama around that type of thing. It was a really well done series. It was really very interesting, and it was unfortunately very, very cliff hung at the end. So they better make a second season of this, because I need to know what happens. So that's what I've been watching. So come for the knitting, stay for the Devar Torah. I'm actually not doing a Devar Torah this week, mainly because the Torah portions of this week are kind of boring at best, and so I wasn't that interested in it. However, next week there is a holy day. I'm not going to say holiday, because that makes you think of, joyfulness and happiness and fun and, great food and all that kind of good stuff. Well, this is one of those Jewish holidays or holy days that is the absolute opposite of that. Next week on Wednesday night going into Thursday is probably the saddest day of the year, next to Yom Kippur, and this holiday is named, oddly enough, simply by its date in the Jewish calendar, and that is Tisha B'Av, which simply means the 9th of Av. Av being a Hebrew or a Jewish month in the Jewish calendar. So, you may or may not have ever heard of the holiday Tisha B'Av, and that's fine. because it's not a particularly well-known holiday. Probably because it's not associated with a lot of joy or happiness. This day commemorates the communal mourning of the Jewish people. Primarily, this date in the Hebrew calendar commemorates 5 calamities in Jewish history. One of those calamities is the 12 spies, and actually we talked about this a couple of episodes back. The 12 spies who went into the promised land, and when they came back, they said it was too dangerous to go into, thus dooming an entire generation to have to die in the wilderness before the Jewish people could enter the promised land. A relatively sad thing to happen. The group of people who escaped Egypt to go to what they believed was the promised land that God had given them, being told, nope, you're not going to make it. You have to die out. Your children will be able to go. The big calamities that happened and are commemorated on this day, although the actual date of these events may have been a little bit different. But it is really around this time of the year that these events happened. The destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem, which was built by Solomon. That temple was destroyed in 587 BCE by the Babylonian conquerors, and the Jewish people in southern Israel, or in the south of the Holy Lands, were taken into captivity into Babylon. This was a huge thing in Jewish history, the destruction of the first temple. It is believed that it is at that point that the Ark of the Covenant went missing because it was the temple was ransacked by the Babylonians, and so this was extremely sad occurrence. This date of Tisha B'Av also commemorates the destruction of the second temple, which occurred also around this period of time in 70 CE. So in the Common Era, it was destroyed by the Romans. And this was the temple that was built after the return from Babylon. So the destruction of the first temple meant the exile of the Jewish people to Babylon. Large group of people did eventually return from Babylon to Jerusalem and to the Israeli homeland to reestablish their control there. However, there were many Jews that remained in Persia, in what basically became modern-day Iran and Iraq. Many Jewish people remained there. But there was this diaspora which occurred, this scattering of the Jewish people primarily to Babylon. At the destruction of the second temple, also huge diaspora. The Jewish people were dispersed, and it really, that diaspora still continues today. The Jewish people are all over the world due to the fact that the Romans destroyed the second temple and kicked the Jewish people out of what was then Palestine. A couple other of the main calamities that are considered and mourned on this day there was a rebellion in 135 CE of the Jewish people against the Romans. It was called the Bar Kokhba Revolt. 500,000 Jewish civilians were killed when this revolt was crushed. And also as retribution, the Romans plowed the Temple Mount to destroy any remnants of the temple that were on the Temple Mount at the time. Throughout the years, from that period of time, some other tragedies are also recognized as having relationship to Tisha B'Av. The First Crusades started in 1096, which resulted in the death of over 10,000 Jews and many communities, Jewish communities, being destroyed in France and Germany. On the 9th of Av, Jews were expelled from England in 1290. On the 9th of Av, Jews were expelled from France in 1306. On the 9th of Av, Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. Germany entered World War I on the 9th of Av. And then later on, the final solution, the German final solution for the Jewish people was approved on Tisha B'Av in 1941, and the deportation of the Jewish people from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka occurred on Tisha B'Av 1942. So there are people that also recognize Tisha B'Av as a Holocaust Remembrance Day. Some of the things that Jewish people do who observe Tisha B'Av, it is a fast day, a fasting day, which means for Jewish people that observe this date, they will fast for 24 hours or 25 hours, which means no eating or drinking. No washing or bathing, no application of any creams or oils or makeups, no wearing of leather shoes, and no sexual relations for that 25 hours. Also, no Torah study. Instead, during this 25 hours, we read the book of Lamentations. Some people read the book of Job, or portions of the book of Jeremiah. We sit on low chairs as though we were sitting Shiva, which is the week of mourning for when a close relative dies. On a slightly high note, if you want to consider it that, it is also a day that is believed that when the Jewish Messiah is born, the Jewish Messiah will be born on Tisha B'Av. So, why observe a super sad day? That's a good question. My thoughts on observing Tisha B'Av, or recognizing and remembering all of these terrible calamities that have befallen the Jewish people. It is a day to remember communal suffering, not individual suffering. We all have our own individual calamities that have happened in our lives, maybe a loss of parents, loss of grandparents, siblings, maybe children. These are horrible things, yes. And many of us probably try to forget them. I think it is important to remember communal suffering, the suffering of your community, things that have befallen your community that should be remembered. Some things that have befallen the communities that I am a member of outside of the Jewish community. There have been approximately 32 million people who have died of AIDS worldwide. 675,000 of them are from the U.S. over the last 30 years. It's been 30 years we've been dealing with the AIDS crisis, and still there is no cure. In 2019 alone, in the United States, 26 transgender or gender nonconforming people have been murdered. And most of those murders have gone unsolved. No justice for those people. Primarily murdered simply for being who they are. And that's just in 2019. Hundreds of thousands of transgender and gender nonconforming people are killed around the world. Black, indigenous, and people of color still endure discrimination, police brutality, unequal justice. COVID-19 has claimed 143,000 lives plus, with no real federal response. These are all communal tragedies that we all experience, some of us more closely than others. I think it is important to remember these calamities, to sit with these calamities, to feel them. Just as the Jewish people have for generations sat on Tisha B'Av as though sitting Shiva for someone who they have lost, and remember the destruction of the Jewish temples, which were the core of who the Jewish people used to be. To sit and remember the 6 million lives lost during the Holocaust of World War II. To sit and remember the people who were forced from their homes simply because they were Jewish. And I think what comes out of that, this communal suffering, this coming together as a community to remember these tragedies, are these types of things. In the LGBTQ community, ACT UP came out of frustration of the communal sorrow that nothing was happening to help our community survive HIV and AIDS. Black Lives Matter has cropped up because nothing is being done to help the lives of people of color attain justice and equal treatment in this country. We need similar types of things to help save our transgender and gender nonconforming siblings that are out there being murdered for no reason, that lose their jobs, that have laws passed saying that they can't use the restroom in public, that basically say they're not people. We need a movement to save ourselves from ourselves with COVID-19. Wear a mask, people. Come on. It's not that hard. That's why I think communal suffering and remembering our communal tragedies can become our communal salvation. There is a quote from a midrash that says, "Had I not fallen, I could not have risen. Had I not sat in the darkness, God would not have been a light for me." And we would not be able to be a light for others and for the next generations. So as we move forward slowly through our communal suffering of the people that we are losing to COVID, to the people we are losing to AIDS, to the people we are losing to racial discrimination, to the people we are losing to transgender discrimination, as we endure these things as a community, may we also, as a community, come together to be our own Messiah, to be born out of these tragedies, our salvation on Tisha B'Av. If you've liked this episode, please click the like, the thumbs up. If you enjoy my channel, please subscribe so that you can see what I do next. I can be found on social media. On Facebook, I have a Facebook page at facebook.com/GreatScottKnitting, all one word. On Instagram, I am GreatScottKnitting, and on Ravelry, I am GreatScottKCMO. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great next couple of weeks. Bye.